If you're over 30 and you're still struggling to lose belly fat, even though you're eating clean and working out, your body and metabolism aren't broken. You've probably just been told the wrong things. So in this video, I'll break down every truth about losing belly fat that many guys haven't heard, so you can finally lose the gut for good. Starting with this silly trap you must avoid in order to get below 15% body fat lean. If you're already over 15% body fat, bulking just adds more fat on top of this. Then cutting becomes harder, longer, and more painful. So focus on getting lean first, while building or at least maintaining the muscle you have. And this way you'll look bigger and feel better and see the muscle growth without the extra fluff from body fat. Further to that, many guys waste a lot of time on this next thing. You can do 1,000 crunches a day and still have a gut. Abs are not made from crunches or in the gym. They're made in the kitchen. So training your core and abs will just increase the muscle thickness of the muscle that's already there, but it doesn't burn the fat on top of that abdominal muscle. So if you want visible abs, focus on losing fat, not bulking, not trying to do endless sit-ups every day. And because we're on the topic of speaking about the gut, this next thing is important to know. The whole women love dad bods idea is bullshit. Your missus or wife might love you for you, but not your belly. They simply tolerate it, but I can guarantee they probably don't prefer it. So don't let anyone suck you into the trap of thinking that you need to be above 20% body fat because that's what women love. One way to make sure you don't fall into that trap is going to be how you work out, which leads to our next point. Lifting heavy and sweating hard doesn't mean anything if you're overeating. You can't out-train a bad diet. You can try, but you'll probably fail, especially if you're busy, over 30, have kids, working a full-time job, or running a business. Because the fact is, you can train harder and harder and still get fatter. And this is why losing belly fat or body fat entirely is not about your training directly, but about the deficit that you're maintaining. Training helps, there's no doubt, I'm not arguing that, but trying to force yourself to do 5 or more workouts per week isn't gonna work unless your nutrition is really dialed in. And to do that, you need to get over this next diet hurdle that most men experience, trying to get to 20% and below body fat. So when most guys start a diet, they all do this same thing. They cut out all the carbs, usually by a lot, but drastically cutting out carbs depletes glycogen. And the thing with glycogen is it holds water. So that fast 5 to 10 pound drop that you might see isn't all fat loss, but majority can be water loss as well. So although it might look very exciting to see 5 or 10 pounds just drop off the scale within 1 to 2 weeks, that's not real fat loss progress until your body fat is consistently dropping. That is when the progress slows down and it starts to mess with your head. And speaking about fat loss progress, you have to avoid this next mistake. You can feel like you're dieting hard, but if your body fat isn't trending down over the weeks, your body is not in a fat loss deficit. And now this is important not to confuse fat loss with weight loss. They can both happen at the same time, but they might not be happening at the same time because you can still actually get leaner without seeing the scale drop super fast. And so fat loss is more like math. It is definitely not magic or special because ultimately it's an equation of the energy balance you're maintaining most consistently. But it can get super frustrating, and here is why. Your body burns fat unevenly. So it starts with the arms, the face, the neck, back, chest, and hips, and lastly, the belly. And this is why the belly is the most frustrating part. It's because this is where we hold visceral fat as well as subcutaneous fat, and typically the most of it around the belly area. So if your gut is still there, but your arms, your face, your neck, your chest, your shoulders all look leaner, it just means you have more fat to lose. And I see a lot of guys get stuck here because they don't understand this next point or actually believe it. So if you struggle to lose belly fat for years, it just means your strategy hasn't worked for you. Once you fix it with consistency and not just all-out effort, fat loss will happen. Because remember, we cannot gain fat from oxygen that we're breathing in or from drinking water or any 0-calorie beverage. It has to come from food. So regardless of your age or of your size, you can get leaner with the right system. However, there is an age-related issue for men over 30 that can start to make fat loss a little bit tougher. Let me explain. Specifically talking about visceral fat, it contains an enzyme called aromatase, which basically converts testosterone into estrogen, thus making it easier to store more fat around the belly as well as the chest and the hips. And as a result, it can make it harder to build more muscle because your testosterone is suppressed. Lower testosterone also suppresses your sex drive, drains your energy, can mess up with your moods, and can also impact the quality of your sleep. Unfortunately, testosterone does naturally decline with our aging process. However, adding more belly fat, particularly visceral fat, accelerates this decline in testosterone, which is why so many men in their 30s feel like shit, like they're stuck in this low gear and they just can't get ahead. And this is why not only losing fat and building muscle is important, but also regulating your stress. However, there is another thing that is widely neglected that is vital for your hormones and losing belly fat. This isn't some special new hack, but 90% of guys are ignoring this. When your sleep sucks, cravings are going to spike. Hunger hormones are going to go wild, and your muscle recovery is going to drop, meaning in your workouts, you just can't push as hard as you probably could if you had better sleep. As a result, fat storage will increase, especially around the belly, and motivation is going to start to fade because you just don't feel good most days. And this is why sleep is one of the most underrated tools for losing belly fat long term. I'm not saying that if you sleep 10 hours a night, you're going to wake up ripped. That's stupidity. But if you fix your sleep, getting leaner can get much easier and much smoother as a process over the months or potentially years that it could take you to get lean, depending on where you're starting from. Problem is, most guys won't even do this because of this next problem. I've known a lot of guys who do absolutely nothing until they are forced to change, meaning it's only when the chest pains or the high blood pressure or the pre-diabetic warnings come in, or there's an injury, someone in the family dies, or they can't pick up their kids, or they've just completely lost their sex drive and their wife doesn't even want to know them anymore. Finally, then they will start to take action, which is far too late. That's the wake-up call. And usually by this point, it's like 10 times harder to fix the problems. So please do me and yourself a favor. Don't wait for a complete meltdown and crisis to take action. Getting lean before you're forced to get lean is going to be a much smoother process and probably one of the smartest moves you'll ever make, because we can always make more money, but we can't get back the health that we lost as we get older and older and older. And for anyone who's saying, oh, Zach, you're only 21 and young. No, I'm actually 32. I'm aging just like you. And soon enough, I'm going to be 40 and 50 and then come back and have a shout at me if I've put on a gut and I'm no longer, muscular and ripped. Feel free to have a go at me in 20 years. But for now, you're the one who's letting yourself down. Not me, not anyone else. And the simplest way to start is by implementing this next simple step. So I totally get it. Tracking food sounds annoying, but so is staying stuck at 25% body fat, wondering why nothing's ever working. So once you track everything accurately for at least 7 days, you will see the truth that you cannot unsee. I'm talking about using cups and scales or any utensil to measure what you're accurately eating. And by doing so, you're going to quickly learn portion sizes and see just how much energy you're consuming. This is like a kindergarten level skill. Anyone can do it if they just focus on it for a week. And by doing so, this gives you a whole new level of awareness. And this awareness gives you control over what you're eating. Because without control, you're just guessing. But when you're back in control, you can make fat loss predictable and consistent. And then you don't need to fall into these diet yo-yo traps that everybody else is doing and trying to convince you that you should do when you don't really need to do anything that anyone else is doing. You just have to focus on what you're eating and how it is impacting your own body. And you can simply make it easy by avoiding this next trap that a lot of guys are falling into still. I will tell you straight, you do not need to go into a keto diet or a carnivore diet or a vegan diet or a paleo diet. You don't have to quit alcohol forever. You don't have to quit sugar forever. And you definitely don't need to train 6 days a week to get lean. If you want to do all that, go for it. But if you don't want to do all that, don't. The problem is this all or nothing mindset is the trap. And it's why most guys fail and fail and fail and fail and just ultimately want to give up, and they start creating beliefs such as,
I'm in my 50s, I just can't look good anymore.
My metabolism is too slow.
Well, I've got some special rare genetic fat gene that I've inherited from my ancestors, and that stops me from losing fat because my insulin's too high.
It's all bullshit stories, mate. If you were locked up in a cage on an island and you were only fed every 2 days, would you gain any fat? Yeah, that's right. You wouldn't, because you can't gain fat from air. So I get that it can be very difficult for some people. Other guys can lose fat quite easily compared to others where it is a challenge. But it doesn't mean it can't happen. It just needs to be done differently in a way that's going to work for you for long enough to actually get below 20% body fat and then below 15 and actually be in a healthy shape that you can maintain regardless of how crazy and hectic your life might be. It's not about the extreme ends of the spectrum. It's about this consistent groove that you can maintain day to day, week to week. That is where the results are going to come from. Just like everything else in your life happens like this. And if your plan is not flexible or sustainable, it's likely going to fail. So I don't want you to delude yourself, and this is why this next step is really important when it comes to getting your programming right. So you can be incredibly strict all week, but a simple weekend blowout can undo 3 to 4 days of actually losing fat. What I mean is you can have a cheat day on a Saturday, which is not what I would recommend. I more recommend factoring in one flexible meal. I'm not a fan of cheat days, but if you were to have a cheat day, it could take you 2 or 3, maybe even 4 days just to get back into a fat loss deficit. And this is why men get stuck. It's not because their diet isn't working. It's because they keep hitting this like reset button every weekend so that come Monday, they're not losing fat. Come Tuesday, they're still not losing fat. Maybe Wednesday, they're starting to dip into the fat storage. Thursday, Friday, and then the weekend hits again. So they only had like 3 days of being in a true deficit, meaning they're actually chipping away at the body fat storage. So I'm not saying that you have to be perfect, but you do need to stay in a weekly deficit. Day to day obviously is important, but if over the 7-day week you are dipping in and out of a deficit, on average, you might really not be in much of a deficit at all. However, when you do maintain this week to week deficit, making sure that you're keeping everything leveled and not bouncing too high and low on your calorie intake or your energy balance, you will predictably get lean, and you will be able to reach 20% body fat, which does start to cause a couple of changes, which I'll quickly explain in this next point. Once you get below 20% body fat, you are going to start feeling better in many ways. You'll have more energy, more focus, more confidence in yourself, how you look, your clothes are going to fit better, your hormones are going to start improving, your workouts will feel better, and your hunger and energy will become easier to manage, because this is where this momentum starts to kick in. However, most guys don't even reach this point because they simply give up way too early. So I encourage you, when it gets difficult and tough, just put your head down, keep going, go through the difficult phase. And once you get beyond that, everything is going to feel a lot easier. There might be periods of time where you have to grind and grind and grind just to lose a couple of pounds. But when you do, it's done and you can see it and you can feel it and you know, okay, cool, I've broken through this phase. Now, is this working? Can I keep going? Or do I need to make a couple of tweaks and changes? And if life does get really tough, just set that as a maintenance period. You can't be pushing yourself every single day, every week, every month, indefinitely. There's going to be a phase where you just have to maintain where you're at, and that is okay. I still see that as a win. If you go a whole month of maintaining because you were overseas for weeks and someone got sick and then there was a business issue or the kids are sick or whatever it is, and you just had 4 weeks of craziness, but you stayed around the same weight, that is a win because you didn't rebound and put on 5 or 10 pounds as a result of that. And so it's important to think about this process as phases. So you might be at 30% body fat. So the first phase is 30 to 25. You stabilize at 25 and then 25 to 20, stabilize there. Then you break past the 20. There might be a bit of difficulty getting from 20 to 18. But once you get to 18 and 17, it's pretty cruisy to get to 15. When you're at 15, you're a couple of percent away from being at 13 or 12 or 11. It's really not that difficult. It's just timings and patience ultimately is what's going to get you there. And to ultimately reach that point of breaking through 20% body fat, you just have to make this final key shift. I've seen plenty of guys who are disciplined as hell, but they still struggle to get lean. They have the discipline, but with the wrong strategy for their lifestyle and goals. So here's the fact. There's going to be days where you have zero willpower to do anything, when your motivation has crashed and you feel like crap, but that is okay. Because with the right systems and the right routine that is sustainable for the way your life is right now, your strategy will carry you through these periods. As soon as life kind of calms down a bit, you can just push that bit more and it all becomes a bit easier. That is assuming that your approach actually fits your lifestyle, your schedule, your appetite, and ultimately the body shape goals that you want to achieve and maintain. And that's when it can start to feel automatic and just like something that's becoming second nature that you don't have to constantly push. It's just happening with you as you're going about life doing what you need to do. This shouldn't be the number one priority because that would require putting everything else in your life as a second or third or fourth priority. I really see fitness and fat loss as something like third or fourth priority on the list, but that comes down to having the right strategy. And that is exactly what my business body blueprint is built for. It's designed for successful men with demanding lives to drop belly fat, get leaner, and build more muscle without giving up family dinners, business lunches, or wasting hours in the gym every day. I'm talking about just 3 efficient workouts, even from home, works perfectly well. I'd rather spend less time getting to the result than wasting more time and not getting to the result. And if you want to see how this works, tap the link just below this video in the description. Once you've had a look or grabbed a copy for yourself, go watch this video next where I share everything I wish I knew about losing belly fat before I did.